Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher. And man, I really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to watch today's video and spend some time with me. We're going to be talking about how to catch bass on slick, calm days, days that the wind is not blowing at all. Based upon a lot of different variables, sometimes the fishing can be really good on calm days. Sometimes it can be super, super tough. But what I want to do in today's episode is I sort of want to go through all the different scenarios that you're going to face that surround a calm day on the water and give you guys some tips and advice on how to catch bass under every one of those situations. So I think it's really going to help you guys out today. Also, a real quick reminder, Tackle Warehouse has got a new shipment of my Blaukat throwback jigs in by Cumberland Pro Lures. If you guys are wanting to order some, they got them in stock right now. Once they get them in stock, they only last a couple weeks and they're gone. But I'd suggest, guys, that we talked about the brown and orange is a really good color. Also, black and chartreuse can be a really good color if you have dirty water you're fishing. So I'll put my throwback link, jig link in the description of the video if you guys would like to order some through that link. Much appreciated there. Okay, calm fishing days. Let's talk a little bit about everything surrounding it because there's a lot of variables. Now, how the fish bite or how they don't bite on a calm day is relative to everything else surrounding the fact that there's no wind. Now, those other factors include the water temperature, the sunlight conditions in terms of, the light intensity, water clarity, temperature clarity, and sunlight conditions have a lot to do with it. Also, the species of bass have a lot to do with it because bass, whether they're a smallmouth bass, a spotted bass, or a largemouth bass, they react differently in a clear water situation where there's no wind or just a situation in general when there's no wind. So we're sort of going to give you guys a good foundation with that. Okay, now one of the things that you have to take into consideration when you do get out there on a day with no wind is the time of the year and the water temperature and water clarity. And I sort of want to let's go through like winter, spring, summer, fall, and I'll give you guys some good examples of what you're talking about. Now, in general, overall, on those calm days when the wind's not blowing, fishing is generally a little bit more tougher, simply because the bass are a little bit more aware. Clouds and wind and low light conditions tend to make them more comfortable. So overall, when you get a situation where you don't have any wind out there, it makes your larger reaction lures sometimes not as productive most of the time. Now, the exception to that rule would be if you were fishing for like smallmouth bass or even largemouth and a spotted bass sometimes, if there's a good topwater bite on. A topwater bite, a lot of times it can actually help you if you don't have any wind because they can see a topwater moving up there if the wind's not blowing from a long distance away. And a lot of times they'll chase it and they'll come a long way away to hit a topwater, especially in clear water, and especially if there's some smallmouth to be caught. So in those situations, the lure categories that I have found that are pretty productive if you don't have any wind, again, are topwaters, if you have a little bit warmer water, and also things like flukes and floating worms can be really good on a calm day. Now, most of the time you're dealing with water temperatures for a floating worm and a fluke and a topwater to work. They need to be over 60 degrees for the most part. So if you have a combination of water over 60 degrees and clear water, like water visibility over 4 feet, a slick calm day can be really, really good in terms of those type of lure categories. But if you start breaking it down into a seasonal approach, here's sort of how I go about it. If I'm fishing a situation in the wintertime when the water temperatures are like in the 40s and low 50s and you have a calm day, that type of a situation usually is going to put the fish deeper for the most part, deeper and suspended. So I'll go to like a little swim bait, something like that, maybe a little Ned rig on the bottom, a little finesse jig. Seems like can be pretty productive. Downsizing your lures is going to be really, really, really important if you have, calm conditions in the wintertime. But they're just not going to hit the bigger reaction baits very much, during that time of year. Now, as the water temperatures start warming up into the 50s and into the 60s in the springtime of the year, it still can be the same thing. The calm conditions can be pretty tough. What I look for in the springtime of the year, once that water temperature gets in the 50s, is look for your off-colored water. Because one of the things that you will find out about not having any wind is the fish are a lot less affected by that, and they'll still bite and they're still fairly aggressive if you have off-colored water. The off-colored water offers habitat and cover for the fish, so therefore they don't quite need the wind. So when that water temperature starts getting into the 50s, I like to head for the dirtiest water I can find if the wind's not blowing. And I'll fish something like a crankbait, maybe some type of a smaller, quiet crankbait. Flip and pitch a jig can be pretty good. Even a chatterbait can be pretty good if the water visibility is off-colored. And when I'm talking about off-colored in that scenario, I'm talking about something less than 2 foot of visibility. Now, as the water temperature starts to get into the 60s and low 70s in the springtime of the year, and those fish start moving up to get ready to spawn, this is another good time of year to catch fish with no wind, because a lot of times you can visibly see those fish cruising. I'm not an advocate of actually pulling them off the beds, but in the springtime of the year, you have a lot of fish that may not be bedding that you can see cruising the bank. They're looking for beds, or they're scouting them out, or they're garden fry or whatever. And if you have a situation like that, not having wind will help you, because you can visually see those fish a little bit better in cleaner water. And again, this is like when I like to throw the floating worms and the flukes and some type of a more subdued bait that I can actually see coming through the water. The wacky rig can be really good in a really calm condition. Now, as the water temperature warms up into the 70s, all the way through fall time of the year, like from about May into October, November, this is when not having wind has the biggest impact as far as a negative impact on the fish if they're largemouth and spotted bass. In general, if you do not have wind and the water temperatures are over 70 degrees, those fish are not going to hit power baits very well. You might catch a few on a swim bait or a glide bait or a crankbait, especially if you're in a water that's got a little bit of a color to it. But for the most part, if you've got those really slick days, even if the water clarity is off colored, you're going to have to slow down and you're going to have to fish bottom baits. So I don't care if the water visibility is 2 feet or 20 foot. If I see the water temperatures over 70 and I don't have any wind out there, that's when I'm going to like dragging a football head jig, fishing something slow on the bottom like a jig or a Texas rig worm or a shaky head or a Ned rig, or some type of a dark sleep or something you want to put on the bottom. Because if you have warm water and you have clear ore water and you have no wind, those fish do not want to like aggressively chase a lure. They want to be tucked down on the bottom. They want to be tucked next to cover, and therefore the smaller presentations close to the bottom are going to work pretty good with that. The only exception is smallmouth. Smallmouth don't seem to mind not having wind or sun, so they react a little bit different to that. So anyway, guys, that's just a real quick foundational tips on fishing with there's no wind. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more subtleties to it that we'll get into at some point. But anyway, hopefully that gets you started, and hope it helps you guys catch a few. So we'll talk later.